The phone rings at 7 in the morning, and I almost don't answer because I don't recognize the number, but something makes me pick up anyway. And when I hear his voice, cold and formal like I'm a stranger he's calling about a business transaction, I know exactly what this is before he even says it. My name is Claire Winters, I'm 32 years old, and the man on the other end of this line is my father, Adrian Winters, the same man who cut me out of his life 3 years ago like I was a mistake he could simply erase, and now he's asking me, in that clipped tone he uses when he's trying to maintain control, if I can just sign a document, just a formality really, nothing complicated, just need your signature to handle some paperwork on the house. The house, he says it so casually, like it's a shared concern, like we're still family who discusses these things over Sunday dinner. But we haven't spoken in 3 years, not since the divorce when he chose his anger over his daughter, when he froze me out financially and emotionally, when he told everyone who would listen that I was ungrateful and difficult and just like my mother, and now here he is, calling at 7 in the morning, asking for my signature like those 3 years of silence never happened. I remember the day everything changed, the day after the divorce was finalized, when I showed up at what used to be our family home expecting to pick up some of my things and found the locks changed, found my father standing in the doorway with his arms crossed looking at me like I was trespassing, and when I asked him what was happening he said very clearly, very deliberately, that I'd made my choice when I sided with my mother, that I was no longer welcome in his house or his life. He told relatives I was poisoned against him, told his friends I was manipulative and ungrateful, rewrote our entire history to make himself the victim and me the villain, and when I tried to explain, tried to tell people that I hadn't chosen sides, that I just wanted both my parents in my life, nobody wanted to hear it because he'd gotten to them first with his version of events. He explicitly told me, standing in that doorway with the afternoon sun behind him making him look like a shadow, that I would get nothing from him, not now, not ever, that he was done being taken advantage of by ungrateful women who only wanted his money. Now, 3 years later, I'm sitting at my kitchen table holding this document he emailed me, this innocent-looking piece of paper that's supposed to be just a formality, and as I read through the legal language I realize something that makes my hands start shaking, not with fear but with understanding. My signature isn't symbolic, it's not a courtesy, it's essential. Without my signature this document means nothing, and without this document my father loses the house, the same house he stood in front of 3 years ago telling me I'd never see again, the same house he said was his and his alone, the house he was so proud of, the house that represented everything he'd built, and now he needs me to save it. I read the document 3 times to make sure I'm understanding correctly, checked the property records online to confirm what I'm seeing, and it's all there in black and white, my name on the deed, my mother's foresight from years ago protecting something I didn't even know needed protecting, and I realized the power shift happened the moment he made that call, he just doesn't know it yet. I remember my father's new wife, Vanessa, the woman he married 8 months after the divorce, the woman who was probably waiting in the wings long before my parents' marriage officially ended, the woman who replaced my mother in his house, in his bed, in his life, and I remember meeting her once, briefly, awkwardly, at a family event I wasn't technically invited to but showed up to anyway. She was polite in that calculated way some people are, smiled with her mouth but not her eyes, made small talk that felt like an assessment, and I could tell she was measuring me, deciding if I was a threat or an inconvenience, and apparently she decided on inconvenience because she never acknowledged me again, never reached out, never tried to bridge whatever gap my father had created. But now, looking at this document, I understand something. This request didn't come from my father alone, this was Vanessa pushing him, Vanessa who probably discovered the property situation, Vanessa who realized they needed me, and sure enough, 2 hours after my father's call, my phone buzzes with a text from a number I don't recognize, and when I open it I see her name, Vanessa Winters, asking if we can talk, woman to woman, about the situation. She calls me that evening, her voice sweet and measured, and she opens with, "Claire, I know things have been difficult, but I was hoping we could move past all that and just be civil, family helping family, you know. And I almost laugh at the audacity, family helping family, like she's part of some family I belong to, like the years of abandonment and silence can be erased with a phone call and some strategic kindness. She talks about how the divorce was hard on everyone, how emotions ran high, how sometimes people say things they don't mean, and I notice she never actually acknowledges what happened, never says my father was wrong, never apologizes, just frames everything as a misunderstanding that time should have healed by now. Then her tone shifts, subtle but clear, and she says, "I'm sure you understand how important it is to help when family needs you, Claire. I'm sure you wouldn't want people to think you were vindictive or petty, holding grudges that should have been let go years ago." And I hear it, the threat wrapped in politeness, the implication that refusing to help will make me the villain again. And I think about how calculated this woman is, how she's already rewriting the narrative before I've even made a decision. That night I can't sleep, so I go through old documents my mother saved, boxes of papers I never thought I'd need to look at, and I find it, the paperwork from 10 years ago when my parents refinanced the house, and there it is, my mother's handwriting in the margin, a note to herself that says, "Protect C's interest, trust fund clause," and I realized this wasn't an accident or an oversight. My mother knew. Even back then before the divorce, before everything fell apart, she knew my father's nature, knew he might one day choose pride over family, and she made sure I had something he couldn't take away. The house isn't just in my name as some formality, it's legally protected as part of a trust that was set up years ago, something my father probably forgot about or never fully understood, something he assumed would never matter because he never imagined needing me, never imagined a scenario where his perfect controlled life would crumble enough that he'd have to come back to the daughter he'd discarded. 2 days after the initial call, my father tries a different approach, calls me in the evening when he knows I'm usually home from work, and his voice is different now, warmer, nostalgic, and he starts talking about memories, about when I was little and we'd work in the garden together, about the time he taught me to ride a bike, about family vacations that feel like they happened to different people in a different lifetime. He says the divorce was hard on everyone, that there was a lot of miscommunication, that he wishes things had gone differently, and I notice he's carefully avoiding any actual acknowledgement of what he did, any real apology, just vague regrets about circumstances rather than choices, and I realize he wants forgiveness without accountability, wants me to absolve him without him having to admit he did anything wrong, and I say nothing, just let him talk himself into a corner. Within a week, my phone starts ringing with calls from relatives I haven't heard from in years, my father's sister first, then his brother, then cousins I barely know, and they all have the same script, slightly different words but the same message underneath, asking me to do the right thing, reminding me that family is important, suggesting that holding on to anger only hurts me, and I realize this is coordinated. This is my father mobilizing his side of the family to pressure me into compliance. One cousin I used to be close to, Bethany, calls and starts gentle but ends frustrated, saying, "Claire, I know you're hurt, but this is about more than you, this is about the whole family, about legacy, about not letting bitterness destroy what generations built," and I want to ask her where this concern for family was 3 years ago when I was being erased, where this talk of legacy was when I was being called ungrateful and cut off. But I don't, I just thank her for calling and hang up. Then I see it, a post on social media from someone in the family, vague but clearly about me, talking about how sad it is when people let grudges destroy relationships, when they can't forgive and move forward, and I realize they're trying to shame me publicly, trying to make me the villain before I've even said no. Instead of reacting, instead of defending myself or engaging with the pressure campaign, I do what my mother taught me, I gather information, I spend 2 days going through property records, financial filings, anything public I can access, and I start to see the bigger picture. My father and Vanessa are drowning financially, the house is mortgaged to its limit, there are liens I didn't know about, Debts that suggest they've been living beyond their means for years. The house isn't just important to them, it's their last asset. Everything else is underwater or spoken for, and without my signature on these documents that would restructure the mortgage and release some equity, they lose everything, not just the house but the image of success my father has carefully maintained, the appearance of having it all together while everything crumbles behind the facade. I understand now why he called, why Vanessa reached out, why the family pressure started, because losing this house doesn't just mean losing a building. It means everyone's seeing how badly my father's choices have failed, how the new wife and the new life he chose over his family have led him to the edge of financial ruin. My father calls again, and this time the warmth is gone, replaced by the authority he used to wield when I was young and he could control everything with just his tone. And he says, "Claire, I've been patient, I've tried to be understanding, but you need to remember who I am, who you're dealing with. I'm still your father and you owe me basic respect." And I hear the desperation underneath the command. Hear him reaching for the old hierarchy that doesn't work anymore. I let him finish his speech about duty and family and respect, let him exhaust himself trying to regain control, and then I say very calmly, very clearly, that I'll think about it, that I need time to process everything, and the fact that I'm not immediately complying, not jumping to help, seems to short-circuit something in him because he just goes quiet, breathing hard on the other end of the line. That night the memories flood back, not the good ones my father tried to weaponize but the real ones, the painful ones, being excluded from Thanksgiving dinner because Vanessa said having me there would be uncomfortable, having my graduation ignored, my birthday forgotten, messages left unanswered, every attempt at connection met with silence or coldness, and I remember how small I felt, how disposable, how I'd lie awake wondering what I'd done wrong, what I could have done differently. I remember the worst part wasn't the anger, it was the erasure, the way he acted like I'd never existed, like 30 years of being his daughter could be deleted because I didn't take his side in a divorce that wasn't about sides, and the pain surfaces fresh and sharp even 3 years later. But so does something else, clarity, understanding that none of this was my fault, that his choice to cut me out says everything about him and nothing about my worth. He calls back the next day with an offer, says if I sign the documents he'll make more of an effort to reconnect, doesn't promise anything specific, doesn't apologize for the past, just offers this vague future possibility of a relationship, and I realize he's still trying to negotiate from a position of power he doesn't have, still trying to dangle what he thinks I want while giving nothing real. I ask him one simple question: do you think what you did to me was right? And the silence that follows is everything. He can't say yes because that would require him to defend the indefensible, can't say no because that would require admitting he was wrong, so he just deflects, says, "I think we both made mistakes, I think the divorce made everyone act in ways they regret, and I know then that he'll never give me what I actually need, never take real accountability, never offer genuine repair." The pressure intensifies, and my father calls again, this time his voice cracking slightly, and he admits what I already know. Without my signature, foreclosure is imminent, the timeline is short, maybe 6 weeks before everything collapses, and I hear real fear in his voice, not fear of losing me but fear of losing everything else, fear of the public failure, the humiliation of foreclosure, everyone knowing he couldn't maintain the life he'd built. He says, "Claire, I'm asking you directly, I need this, I need you to help me," and for the first time he's being honest, not manipulative, not strategic, just desperate, and I realize this is probably the most honest he's been with me in years, and there's something almost satisfying about hearing him admit he needs me after spending 3 years telling everyone he didn't. I think about my mother's words, spoken to me a year after the divorce when I was still trying to fix things with my father, still trying to prove I was worth keeping, and she said very gently, very sadly, "Claire, one day he'll need what he discarded, one day he'll realize what he threw away, and you'll have to decide who you want to be when that day comes, whether you want to be like him or better than him." And I didn't understand then, but I understand now. She wasn't telling me to help him, she was telling me to choose deliberately, to act from intention rather than reaction, to make sure whatever I decided came from a place of clarity rather than anger or obligation. And sitting here with his desperation fresh in my mind and 3 years of pain still present in my heart, I know exactly what I need to do. I call my father back and tell him I'll consider signing, but I have conditions. I want complete transparency about the financial situation. I want written acknowledgement of the cutoff and its impact. I want formal recognition of my stake in the property that my mother protected, not as a gift from him but as something that was always mine. And the silence on the other end of the line is so long I think he might have hung up. Finally he says, "You can't be serious. You're turning this into some kind of negotiation. I'm your father. You don't get to make demands." And I say very calmly that actually I do, that he came to me for help, that I'm under no obligation to give it, and that if he wants my signature he can meet my terms or he can find another solution, knowing full well there is no other solution. He explodes, actually screams at me over the phone, accuses me of blackmail, of betrayal, of being vindictive and cruel, and the irony would be funny if it wasn't so painful. Him accusing me of the exact things he did to me 3 years ago, and I just listen, let him exhaust himself, let him rage until he runs out of steam. And then I hang up without saying another word because I don't owe him an audience for his anger. Vanessa calls an hour later, her voice soft and careful, and she tries a different approach, says she understands I'm hurt, says she knows my father hasn't always handled things well, says she's been working on him to be better. And I almost believe her until she says, "But Claire, you have to understand, losing this house would destroy him, and I don't think you really want that on your conscience." And I realize she's trying to make his potential loss my responsibility, trying to transfer the burden of his choices onto me. A carefully worded apology arrives by email 2 days later, formal and distant, saying he regrets that his actions during a difficult time caused me pain, that he wishes circumstances had been different, that he hopes we can move forward as a family, and I read it 3 times looking for any actual acknowledgement of specific wrongs, any genuine contrition, and find nothing, just corporate speak designed to appear apologetic without admitting fault. I respond with documentation, forward him copies of the property records showing my legal stake, copies of the trust documents my mother set up, a timeline of every attempt I made to contact him that went unanswered, every birthday and holiday I spent alone, and I attach it all with a simple message: "Here's the transparency you seem to have forgotten," and I don't wait for his response. I consult a lawyer just to be certain, a family law attorney my mother recommended, and she reviews everything, the property documents, the trust, my father's request, and she confirms what I already knew. I'm under no legal obligation to help, I'm fully within my rights to negotiate, and she adds something else, something I hadn't considered, that by not exercising my rights to this property for 3 years I could have lost them, that my father's cutoff ironically protected my claim because I never signed anything giving up my interest. She says, "You hold all the cards here, Claire, the question isn't legal, it's personal. What do you want from this situation? What would make you feel at peace with whatever decision you make?" And I realize I already know the answer. I don't want revenge. I don't want to hurt him the way he hurt me. But I do want recognition. I do want protection. I do want to make sure I never end up in a position where someone can discard me so easily again. Word spreads through the family somehow, probably through Vanessa, and suddenly the same relatives who pressured me to help are calling with a different energy, more respectful, more careful, and I realize they know now that I actually have power in this situation, that I'm not just being stubborn, I'm holding something real, and people who dismissed me as the difficult daughter are suddenly interested in my perspective. Bethany calls again, and this time there's no lecture about family obligation, just a quiet apology, saying she didn't understand the full situation, didn't realize how badly things had gone, and I appreciate the honesty even if it came 3 years too late. And she says, "Claire, whatever you decide, I hope you know you don't owe anyone anything, especially not someone who treated you like you were disposable." My father's text message comes that evening, formal and brief. asking if we can meet in person, no phone call, no intermediaries, just the two of us, and I agree because I want to see his face, want to see if the years have changed him or just his circumstances. We meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes, neutral territory, and when he walks in I'm struck by how much older he looks, how the arrogance that used to define him has been replaced by something uncertain, and he sits across from me looking at his hands, not at my face, and the silence stretches between us like a physical thing. The house looms in both our minds, the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial he was so proud of, the symbol of everything he'd built, everything he thought proved his worth, and now it's the thing that brought him back to me, not love, not regret, but necessity, and we both know it, and finally he says, very quietly, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I should never have cut you out. I was angry and prideful and I let that destroy something I should have protected, and it's the apology I needed. 3 years ago, and I don't know if it's enough now. I tell him I'll sign the documents, but not as a gift, not as forgiveness. I'll sign them because my mother protected my interest in that house and I choose to exercise that interest by helping preserve it, but I want legal documentation of my stake. I want formal recognition that this isn't charity, it's me protecting something that's partly mine, and I want him to understand that my signature doesn't erase what happened, doesn't mean we're suddenly fine. He agrees to everything immediately, too quickly, desperately, and I realize he doesn't care about the terms as long as he keeps the house, as long as the foreclosure doesn't happen, as long as the public failure is avoided, and part of me is sad that it's still about image for him, still about how things look rather than how they are, but I accept that I can't change him, I can only decide how I respond to him. Vanessa shows up at the signing, uninvited but not unexpected, and as we wait for the lawyer to finalize everything she looks at me with something that's not quite anger but close, and she says, I hope you're satisfied, making your own father beg, putting conditions on helping family, and I see it finally, the mask slipping, the calculated politeness giving way to actual resentment. I look at her very calmly and say, I spent 3 years being cut off, 3 years being told I was ungrateful and difficult, 3 years being erased from my father's life, so yes, I'm satisfied that he had to actually ask for my help instead of just expecting it, and she has nothing to say to that, just looks away, and my father doesn't defend her or correct her, just sits there looking defeated, and I realize their relationship is probably not what it appeared to be. The signing itself is anticlimactic, just documents and signatures and a notary confirming everything, and I sign my name slowly, deliberately, thinking about all the times my father told me I was nothing, that I'd get nothing from him, that I was no longer his concern, and now my signature is the thing saving everything he built, and there's something poetic about that even if it's painful. When it's done I stand up and walk toward the door without looking back, without waiting for thanks or acknowledgement, and my father calls my name but I don't stop, because this wasn't about reconciliation, this was about me choosing to be better than the pain he caused, choosing to help not because he deserved it but because I deserved to not carry anger forever. The house is saved, the foreclosure is avoided, and my father sends a formal thank you text the next day, polite and distant, and I realize the relationship isn't restored and probably never will be, and I'm okay with that. I did what I did for me, not for him. I helped because my mother's foresight gave me the choice and I chose to use it with intention rather than reaction. The family dynamic shifts permanently. People treat me differently now, with more respect, more caution, because I proved I wasn't powerless. I proved that being quiet doesn't mean being weak, and my father realizes too late that access to me doesn't equal closeness, that signing a document doesn't mean I'm back in his life. It just means I kept my word when he couldn't even keep his. Months pass and I think about everything that happened, how being cut off forced me to build a life without him, how that independence became my strength, how the worst thing he ever did to me actually freed me from needing his approval, and I realize my mother was right. He needed my signature to keep his house, but I never needed his permission to reclaim my worth. The document sits in my file cabinet now, proof that I own part of that house, proof that I mattered even when he said I didn't, Proof that sometimes the people who discard you are the ones who end up needing you most, and I'm grateful not for the reconciliation that didn't happen but for the clarity that did, for understanding finally that my value was never determined by whether he acknowledged it. It existed whether he saw it or not. I drive past the house sometimes, that beautiful colonial that almost slipped away, and I don't feel anger or bitterness, just a quiet satisfaction knowing that my signature saved it, that the daughter he threw away was the one who kept his legacy standing, and maybe that's the best ending this story could have had, not reconciliation but resolution, not forgiveness but freedom, not his acknowledgement but my own.